Back to Bedroom Brainiacs, adult sex ed for everything you wish you learned in high school. This is the final video in our series on the circles of sexuality. As you can see, I have a guest, I have a guest with me today. We're going to wrap up talking about the circles of sexuality by talking about two circles that have been added since the original model was developed. So we thought that having this as a conversation between myself and Kat would be a good way to sort of wrap this up and talk about how the circles have kind of changed and evolved over time. So Kat, thank you for being here.
So good to be here. I'm so excited to be with you, Kate. And so my name is Kat Dukes. I'm a sex therapist, an educator, and a trainer. And I'm also the owner of the Center for Connection and Desire, which houses Bedroom Brainiacs, our adult sex education services.
Yeah, so I'm glad Kat is here today because she is able to give more of a perspective from a therapy point of view. And as an educator and a trainer, I can give more of a perspective from an education point of view. Mm-hmm. So we're going to go through each of the two kind of bonus circles, talk about what they are, and then talk about how they fit in with the rest of the circles of sexuality. So the first circle is power and agency. So we think of power and agency, power being the ability to influence and control, and then agency being the ability to make decisions and take action. So when I think about power and agency in the world of sexuality, I first of all think of rights, so legal rights specifically around consent, and also legal rights around reproductive health. Mm-hmm. I also think from a more personal point of view, there's power and agency in self-esteem and self-worth and how that can show up in our relationships. And then also not just how we see ourselves, but how we see our partners as well, and how we see the humanity in ourselves and in our partners. Mm-hmm. Kat, what would you add to that?
When looking at the circles from the perspective of like layering over power and agency, when I work with individuals and couples in sex therapy or in regular psychotherapy, this idea of power is really very critical, right? And actually, I don't know if you know, but or our audience knows, but actually, if there's abuse happening in a couples therapy is actually contraindicated. Like we are not supposed to do couples therapy because each person in the couple actually doesn't have like agency, right? Because the imbalance of power is such that it's actually not safe to do couples therapy. So in many ways, this idea of like power and agency is really critical around couples therapy. But when I think about power and agency around like sexuality, if someone's coming to therapy for sexuality work, like agency is like that capacity to have control and make decisions for oneself. And if you don't have that ability and you don't have that, if you don't have that capacity, then it influences everything else, right? So people go to therapy to grow and change. So let's look at like sexual health and reproduction. If someone feels like they don't have the capacity to take care of their body and health, they won't be able to do much around growth and change in that area. If they don't feel like they have the capacity to expand how they might want to serve themselves from a sensuality perspective with like more affection, more bodily contact, more wonderful sensual activities, they won't be able to do that. If their partner holds power over them in any way around like pressuring them to have sex or pressuring them to do certain activities, then it's really interrupting that other partner's ability to be able to exercise their own power and agency about exploring and feeling comfortable and safe and what's good for them around their sexuality and in their relationship.
Yeah, thank you. So when I think about power and agency showing up in the like individual circles of sexuality, we've already mentioned like within an intimate relationship, how if there's a power imbalance, that will definitely affect the relationship. I think from a political perspective, if you grow up in a world where your ability to make decisions about your own body, is legislated and people are fighting over those rights every single year, that's going to affect how you see your body from a body image and sensuality perspective. Your body image can definitely be influenced by the media, by politics, and by sort of conversations around what bodies are supposed to and not supposed to look like.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree.
All right. Anything else you want to say about this circle?
No, I'm excited to move on to values because I think this is such a like a critical area that has that incredible influence over every single other aspect of people's sexuality.
Yeah. So the final circle, bonus circle, is values. So I would define values as the motivations and beliefs that influence how we make decisions about our life, how we decide what is right and what is wrong and what is meaningful. So as an educator, values kind of play a huge role in education because we are most of the time trying not to bring our own personal values into the classroom, but then at the same time trying to respect the wide variety of values that are among our students and our audience, while knowing that a topic like sexuality is so charged with values that it's kind of like this thing where, it's like the elephant in the room. You're trying not to acknowledge it, even though it's definitely present and it comes up so frequently as an educator in a classroom. So when I think about values and sexuality, I think about reproductive rights. I think about ideas around identity. I think about ideas and beliefs around what makes a family. Yeah. What else is coming to mind for you, Kat?
As an educator, like who deserves to have human rights, right? Based on which identities, because you and I were talking earlier about like certain identities. If you hold certain identities, often those are legislated in such a way that you don't have access to, maybe bathrooms or education or, certain kinds of access to health services based on certain identities. When I think about values in the work that I do with folks around sex therapy or couples therapy, like values are like the biggest piece. I have to be very mindful and careful to like explore and learn the values of my clients, because it actually tells me where to go in the therapy and the treatment objectives and things like that. So like, for example, like I might have one couple that comes in for, sex therapy. And they want to, explore like greater intimacy and more pleasurable sex and things like that. But then they tell me things like, but we don't have oral sex. We don't like to talk about sex. We don't believe in sex toys and this other thing. And I'm like, okay. So in order to do sex therapy in a way that honors, folks' values, I might be more limited as I do that work within that honors their values, right? But then other people might come in and they might say like, I'm nervous about sex, I'm uncomfortable with it, but I really value being more open and more educated. It's like, okay, where we have our values around being like, oh, I want to be more open, I want to explore more, I want to learn about my body, I want to feel more comfortable with my body, I want to be more open with my partner. Like, okay, but at this time I'm really not. Okay, so that's where we have like our feelings and our behavior and like maybe some anxiety is like not in line with our values, but our values are still over here and we can move towards them, right? And so in exploring the values around sexuality is actually really critical for my work as a sex therapist, so I can help my clients work within them or like work towards them. And so I know that's speaking about that like actually very, very broadly, but that's how critical it is in the therapy world.
Yeah, thank you. So to wrap it up, I just want to say from an education standpoint that I find the Circles of Sexuality really valuable. It's, when you think of the word of sexuality, it's very kind of nebulous and abstract, and teaching abstract concepts is very difficult in a classroom setting. So my brain really appreciates that I can kind of break it down into these, 5 or 6 different categories, both like for my own thinking about what sexuality is, but then also how I teach people about what sexuality is. I find it really helpful to have these categories where we can say like, okay, birth control and STIs goes in health and reproduction, and then falling in love and having crushes, that goes into intimacy. It's just kind of like a quote, like assign things to different categories, which just makes it so much easier to teach rather than this like kind of abstract concept.
I totally agree. And so in my individual and couples work, especially around sex therapy, the Circles of Sexuality are a great model for me to be able to help clients like gain insight and look at their sexuality and their eroticism and their health and their relationships from these different lenses. So I like use the circle as lenses, so like tell me about your identity growing up, and like, tell me about the identity you have now. How do you feel about your orientation or your gender? And the same thing for intimacy. Like, what does intimacy mean to you in the context of your sexuality? And regarding sensuality, like, what's pleasurable to your body in the way of touch? What's pleasurable for you to see and hear and smell and taste? And so it gives all these wonderful lenses as we like move through exploring each couple's sexuality or the individual person's sexuality. They can look at their sexuality through all these lenses, and I can kind of help coach them through that so they can actually gain deeper insight about who they are and their eroticism, and then also gain deeper insight about how they would like to be and what areas they would like to grow and change.
Yeah, I love that. And as you were speaking, I kind of thought of how, like, as a teaching tool, it can be really helpful if I'm developing a lesson plan or a training plan, about a certain topic. I can think about, like, if I'm teaching a lesson on birth control, am I addressing intimacy? Am I addressing sensuality as well? Because it's easy when you're thinking of, a lesson plan to just really narrow in on one thing and kind of ignore all the other aspects of sexuality. So it can be a cool kind of like checklist tool to be like, okay, these are the different aspects I want to talk about, and have I addressed them?
Exactly. And as you were talking, I was thinking about another, like the broader reason why this is so helpful to me is often when clients come to me for sex therapy, they often have a very narrow view of what sex is. Sex is like penis and vagina, it's intercourse and things like that. And they're thinking maybe of sexual health and reproduction, but I'm not thinking about the rest of it. So it's so neat to be able to broaden that, and that there's such a benefit in that too. So I'm so glad that you did this series for Bedroom Brainiacs on the circles, because I think it's so helpful for everyone to be able to gain deeper insight around not just sexuality in general, but their own.
Yeah, me too. Well, I'm so glad we were able to have this conversation today. And I am excited to see what other topics we get into as we keep talking about sexuality for adults.
Awesome. Thanks everybody for watching, and have a great day.
Bye.